Good morning. I wanted to do a quick video. I've done this video a few times and don't want to ramble. Want to really show you something that I found out about the IRS and the Department of Homeland Security and how they're doing what just seems baffling to me. So anyway, this is a Nakamoto Group contract number. How did I find it? I don't know. Typed in Nakamoto Group with a PDF at the end, and this popped up. Okay, so the issuing office is ICE Mission Support, Assistant Secretary, Immigration and Customs Enforcement. There's addresses all over this, but we're not really concerned with that. Let's go down, and I'm going to show you what it says. This is all about detention, but it's not only about that, it's also about how rights are classified as stocks. Okay, rights are classified as stocks, but only if a certain detail applies. And I think the detail is permanent residence, permanent residency. Okay, so all the forms that you've been filling out, if you ever fill out a form or petition the government, those forms even try to put you into a category that you're not properly in. So you have to be very, very careful. I'm going to show you two examples, but let's go. K. Now, K is also the letter they're using there's a passport system of privacy records and how they're disclosing your private information and who they're disclosing it to. And when they do something called a public notice, you are supposed to know that they're doing this, but I think it would be hard for anyone to know all of the ways they're doing it. But I can definitely see that the passport application and now the DS-4194, which they just recently changed, are ways to implicate you into a position you might not want to be in. So you really need to read, or they'll say you're incompetent. And God only asks that we be competent enough to not be deceived. All right, competent enough to not be deceived as to what they're trying to do. So they're going to say the contractor agrees to hold and save DHS harmless from any unauthorized use. Talks about how they're using this information for travel expenses. Anyway, K. I'm going to go over the other K in a minute. Non-U.S. citizens shall not be authorized to access or assist in the development, operation, management, or maintenance of department IT systems under the contract unless a waiver has been granted by the head of the organizational element or designee with the concurrence of both the department's chief security officer and chief information officer or their designees within DHS headquarters. The waiver may be granted only with the approval of both the CSO and the CIO or their designees in order for a waiver to be granted. The individual, if it doesn't say private individual, I'm not sure what they're referring to. Are they referring to a fictitious office? A fictitious officer? Be careful when you see the word individual, unless you're going to go in and do an affidavit and say, I'm a private individual. I would steer clear of this word. Instead, you're a natural man. If you're seeking authentication services, you're a natural man, no matter what the form says. Okay, but the new form, DS-4194, is trying to get you to bargain away your privacy rights. Well, they're already admitting here the individual must be a legal permanent resident. Okay, now watch these words carefully. Of the U.S., not America, and not the state where you accept mail, or a citizen of Ireland, Israel, the Republic of the Philippines, or any nation on the Allied Nations list maintained by the Department of State. There must be a compelling reason for this individual as opposed to a U.S. citizen, and the waiver must be in the best interest of the government. Let's keep going. There's a prohibition on contracts with corporate expatriates. So this is page 13 of the document. It's a 117-page document. And it says right here, special rule for related partnerships. Right here. It talks about what stock is. Okay, up here. Section 835 Homeland Security Act, Public Law. But definitely look it up. Special rule for related partnerships. For purposes of applying Section 835B of Public Law to the acquisition of a domestic partnership, except as provided in regulations, all domestic partnerships that are under common control within the meaning of Section 482 of the Internal Revenue Code of 1986 shall be treated as a partnership. Treatment of certain rights shall be treated as stocks to the extent necessary to reflect the present value of all equitable interests incident to the transaction as follows: warrants, options, contracts to acquire stock, convertible debt instruments. Now, what is a convertible debt instrument? And other similar interests. Rights labeled as stocks shall not be treated as stocks whenever it is deemed appropriate to do so to reflect the present value. Okay. Again, certain rights shall be treated as stocks. Person, domestic and foreign, have the meanings given by such paragraphs 1, 4, and 5 of Section 7701A of the Internal Revenue Code, respectively. So you need to read all of these codes. But they're telling you up here, your little hint is permanent resident. And this is obviously not legal advice of any kind. It's not medical advice. If you hurt yourself and you need to see a doctor, I can't tell you what to do. But I can tell you what they're doing at every medical facility as well with these forms. So everything you do, you have to either rescind it or not sign it. You know, if you're under duress, because this, again, the individual must be a legal permanent resident. All right, there it is. So who's treated as stocks? Legal permanent resident. This is a very interesting document that goes over a lot. So let's go into this. Okay, so where did this go wrong? This is the Privacy Act, System of Records, Passport Records, State 26. You can read the whole thing. It's got people to contact. John Hackett, Acting Director, Office of Information Programs and Services. If you have anything you want to discuss about this form, it's not a form, it's a notice, you could contact, but I don't know if he's acting. This was, when was this published? 2015. All right. System name, passport records, security classification. Now, why am I telling you this? Because when you ask for an authentication for your birth certificate, okay, your birth is different than the fictitious entity they created to identify your estate. Those are two different things. So when you use their form, I believe you're sending it to this office, but I'm not sure. I'm gonna show you that in a second. Categories of individuals. There's that word again. So unless it says private individual or private person, this word is, it has a whole bunch of obligations attached where you are assigned, basically acting as a public officer against your will without pay. So you're not an individual, unless you are. If you are, I don't know. Although U.S. citizens, as opposed to Americans or United States of American citizens or a state national, Texan, Floridian, Californian, are not or may not be entitled under relevant passport laws and regulations to the issuance or possession of U.S. passport books, cards, or other documentation or services. Okay, so always look at K. For some reason, they've got a lot of weird stuff under K. It says you may request your own or another passport records under FOIA or privacy, whether successfully or not. Categories of systems in the records. Right? Lookout files. So they're putting certain people, certain natural men under Penhollow on a lookout file. So you're treated differently when you go in and you apply for something or you send something. You're on a lookout file right here, which identify those persons. Again, you're not a person under Penhollow. Look at Penhollow. It's a natural man cannot be controlled by, these fictitious title things. They're not allowed to do it. For a consular or related service required other than routine examination or action. Lookout files. All right. So right here, they're admitting to treating certain people differently. Miscellaneous materials, which are documents and or records maintained separately. Investigatory reports compiled in connection with granting or denying passport and related services or prosecuting violations of passport criminal statutes. Go. Birth records, copies of state-issued driver's licenses and ID cards. If you ever apply for any kind of ID, they're telling you right on these applications how they're going to be using your name in other states without your without your informed consent, and then they're just claiming you volunteered your name. So you got to read everything. Medical, personal, and financial reports. So medical, I found this a long time ago when I was looking down in Orange County juvenile records. The medical files are like an account. They're an account. They're a financial account, basically. So the passport office has all of these. Okay, now why is that important? Because the request for authentication services just changed from this, just says name, last, first. I wouldn't even mess with the middle initial now. Either do last and first or last, first, hyphen, your middle name, because the way this is an office. It is an office. It's like a fictitious office that never pays you. It's not your real name, right? If you're doing a request for authentication in both sections for the hog and the non-hog countries, all right, this is the country you believe you're in. It could be Iowa. It could be America. And this is the country where you're using the information. You're using this is just for birth certificate. Can be used for affidavits, land deeds, whatever. Okay, request for authentication services. DS-4194 is used by the Department of State for documents submitted by U.S. citizens and foreign nationals. Okay, and foreign nationals. doesn't say anything. It doesn't talk about you giving up any of your rights on here. Except it does say individual's full name or company name. Individual. I guess you could go in and cross out individual if you wanted to, but more importantly, they've been sharing your information since your birth, which is why certain people are treated differently. They have you on a lookout file. So what is this one called? State 26. This is State 26. So the new Department of State Authentication Service form. So you have your birth certificate that represents you, the living natural man, and you get it. If you're in California, you would get apostilled at Secretary of State Shirley Weber's office. They send it back. You get it back. It's got the stamp. You send it off to this is U.S. Department of State. This one also says U.S. Department of State. Okay, there's no OMB number down here. Just look at the form very carefully. It's a completely different form with different obligations now that they've created. This used to be the authentication form a long time ago. They're asking for a cover letter. And I think they'll do it without a cover letter because many people have gotten it done without a cover letter. I don't know what they're referring to as an appropriate cover letter, but this seems sufficient. Name, address, bracketed zip code. If you insist on putting a zip code, I wouldn't do it. But if you do, to ensure that it comes back to you, make sure it's in brackets and put zip exempt anyway, or put it all zeros. I receive it with all zeros, but they sometimes cross out the all zeros and write in the zip code, even though I didn't write it in. So, not they, but I don't know who's doing it. I don't know if it's the mail, the mail carriers or who's doing it, but number of documents 1, it's now $20, payment enclosed. All right. So this is the old one. It's got your name. It doesn't make any, it doesn't say what they're going to do with your privacy. And then you got the new one. This form is used by individuals, institutions. Now, this is a notice right up front, and it's an OMB control number. Okay, so later in the form, it says you're not required to give any of the information if it doesn't have an appropriate OMB control number. So why doesn't the old form have it? Because this is just you authenticating the record. That's it. That's it. There's no other obligations on this. I've looked. Doesn't say it's going to sell your information or share it with anyone. This one has a lot in it that we need to just look at real quick. False statements is now punishable by fine or imprisonment, where before it just says it might be a delay. On this one, it says it just might be a delay to get your documentation back. So read both forms, look at it. Also be advised, pursuant to 22 CFR 131.2, the Department of State will not certify to a document when it has good reason to believe that the certification is desired for unlawful or improper purpose. All they're doing is they're authenticating that the signature, whoever did the signature on the form, was in their proper position. That's all they're doing. They can't make legal assessments about anything else. They're just certifying that private party was in their proper position when they signed the form. That's all it is. Authorities. Now we got Privacy Act statement. The purpose for soliciting the information requested on this form is to ensure that the documentation submitted is the same. Okay, this form is used. It doesn't say must be used. So if you think about compelled speech, you're not forced to use this form. But on their website, They do have words like you must use the form. And if you look at the original meaning of must, it meant have room to use the form. You may use the form. Mother, may I use the form? Well, not if you want them to steal your privacy. Privacy Act statement. The purpose for soliciting the information requested on this form is to ensure that the documentation submitted is the same as the documentation received and processed by the Office of Authentications, which is misleading because then they show you how they intend to use the information, which they also showed you in Federal Register, but I didn't know about this Public Notice 9068. Nor did I know about Public Notice 6290 because it's not listed on this form. It's listed on this form. So now you have to look at each and every one. The information solicited on this form may be available as routine use to other government agencies and private contractors to assist the U.S. Department of State in issuing certificates under the seal of the U.S. Department of State and requests for related services, whatever that means, and for law enforcement, fraud prevention, border security, counterterrorism, litigation activities, and administrative purposes. Of all of these, the worst one is this one, administrative purposes. For a more detailed listing of routine uses, I guess it doesn't say a state. Anyway, you can look these up if you want. I just looked up this one because it's being run through the Passport Records office, so that's the one I looked up. So if you have any questions, it says you do not have to supply this information unless this collection displays a current valid OMB control number. Here, it seems like they're kind of insinuating you can create your own form, but under the compelled speech doctrine, they can't tell you what to say. They can't tell you you must use a form, which disparages your rights and is now going to use your information and share it with all these agencies. They can't offer to alienate any of your private rights. They can't. But right here it says person of contact's name. Okay, well, number one, unless you're a private person, you're not a person. Because that's a fictitious. We don't know how they mean it. They didn't give us a list of definitions. So if you choose to use this crazy form, this is the burden upon you. They've given you how they're going to use your information, which was already given in here. Passport records, you must submit a signed and notarized written request or a written declaration signed and dated under penalty of perjury pursuant to 28 U.S.C. 1746 and include all pertinent facts. Okay, well, it's a lot. And that's just for the ones in consular birth abroad, consular reports of death abroad, certificate witness to marriage, Panama Canal zone birth and death certificates, and certification of no records. All requests for passport records issued from 1925 to present should be submitted to the following. This one doesn't say it has to. Oh, yeah. Under penalty of perjury, right up here. All right. I think you could do it in good faith. In good faith. But I don't know. In good faith. If Jesus Christ took away the curse of the law, this is not really a law. It's just what they're telling you is their rule. So now that Chevron was overturned in Bright Loper, I'm not sure that they can do these strange rules anymore. But anyway, you want to be careful with this new one. Read it. It now reads like the old DS-11, which if you haven't rescinded, puts you in bed with the Treasury and the IRS and all of the agencies and, uses for all this. It says all of this. It doesn't say quite all in the same way, but that led me to find this. And Penhollow. Penhollow versus Dones Administrators. 354, no corporate jurisdiction over the natural man. All right. And that the legal manifestation of this is that no government, as well as any law, agency, aspect, court, can concern itself with anything other than, I think it says fictitious entities. But when you click in, it gives you the whole ruling. And let me also show you compelled speech. Okay, so the First Amendment, I like this, Compelled Speech by David Hudson, published on July 31st, 2023, and updated here. It basically says that they can't tell you what to do or what to say. The First Amendment not only limits the government from punishing a person for his speech, it also prevents the government from punishing a person for refusing to articulate, advocate, or adhere to the government's approved messages. So, down here, Rumsfeld Forum for Academic and Institutional Rights, fair. All's fair in love and war. Well, no. Chief Justice John G. Roberts reiterated the essence. Some of the court's leading First Amendment precedents have established the principle that freedom of speech prohibits the government from telling people what they must say. So if you go to the website that backs this one up, it says what to include in your request. You must include the following. Okay? And then, that's for authentication services. Also has apostille in here. State and local. Right up here it says mail your. Isn't that an option to use your own form? I think the option is enshrined in the government can't tell people what they must say, and they can't compel them to be a part of a franchise where they're getting they don't get any consideration for being a part of a franchise, and they don't live in Washington, D.C. Unless they do. Unless you do live there. I still think you could probably say, I don't live in Washington, D.C. Can governments force groups to financially support certain programs? I don't think they can. So you can read the compelled speech doctrine. We have Jordan Peterson talking about it everywhere. Wow, that's weird. Those just disintegrate. Let me go. The fill-in form. This DS, if you're using last, first, middle, initial, again, I would just use last and first. Because they're trying to put you into an office that you're not getting paid for. So just be careful when you use these forms, or just do first, dash, middle, full name spelled out. And you can, this form is not terribly, it's not terribly badly written. It's not awful. But you should be reading this too. How they're already using it. How they've already been sharing your information if you don't rescind it. Which is why I think enough people have rescinded it that they now are putting it on this new form because the old form said none of that language. That's it. Hope you guys are doing great, and talk to you later.